I'm Alistair Stevens.
I'm Elizabeth Ray.
And Tom Cruise is Ethan Hunt one more time in Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning.
One more time so far. We're going to have a few more times, I think. At least one more time?
At least one more time.
Yeah.
At least one more time in May of 2025. Dead Reckoning Part 2, as was, now currently unnamed Mission Impossible sequel. Because why have a name for a movie that's coming out in like 10 months? I don't know.
Oh, man. I'm excited to hear all of the behind-the-scenes stuff about this movie because I feel like I have been seeing, or had been rather seeing, like the promotional material for that motorcycle jump off the cliff for years before the movie actually came out.
It felt like a long time coming. And of course, it was a long time coming, interrupted by the COVID-19 pandemic,
right?
and by numerous shutdowns and numerous reshoots too. It is weird looking at Dead Reckoning Part 1, or just Dead Reckoning as we're going to call it from this point forward. It's weird that jump isn't very impressive.
No,
it doesn't.
It's not.
Look, what's the word I'm looking for? Good? Good? Convincing?
Well, it's just we've worked so hard to do less CGI in the Mission Impossible movies, and I've loved that so much, or in Tom Cruise movies in general. And I think when we just saw Maverick, we were so impressed. And so now that, like, the jump itself was fine, but the mountain he was driving up did not look in the least real. Like, specifically the path he was driving up did not look
and of course, in
real.
real life, it was a ramp that had been constructed because you can't just really drive up a mountainside like that. But yes, the compositing, the digital compositing throughout this film looks a little shaky. We're going to get to all of that because I have an important question for you, because this is a banner day here on The Last Star in Hollywood. This is our 44th episode. This is our last episode in, I guess, what we could call season 1. We have caught up with the Tom Cruise filmography. My question to you is this. After almost a year, after 44 episodes, who do you hate more, me or Tom Cruise? The guy who made you do this, or the guy that you spent a year watching?
I think right now it might be you just a little bit.
Well, that's all right, because I'm mad at Christopher McQuarrie for giving us Dead Reckoning to cap off this run. Because
that's the part that's really tough, is that we've seen so many great movies. We've enjoyed this so much. We just had such a hot run with Maverick. And now
the Fallout Maverick back-to-back
was really
is as
exciting.
good as it gets. Yeah.
And I'll admit I had my hopes up for this movie, which I had put off watching. Which I wanted to watch for pleasure because of this podcast, so it would be fresh. And I was so let down by it that now it's like, oh, damn. All right, knock this out and go to work in a couple hours, huh?
I don't think that this film is bad. I don't think I don't think it's a disaster. I don't think it's very, very far from being the worst Mission Impossible film. I just think that coming off of that run of Fallout and Maverick, it's a real step down.
It's a letdown.
It is. Yeah, nowhere near as good as either of those films. But it does something unusual for the franchise, which we'll talk about now, because I've got a brief dispiriting game to play before we get into our description of this film.
Cool.
That's how I've chosen to brand it. That's where we are. Halfway through Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning, there's the scene in the Venetian rave hosted by Alana Mitsopoulos, by the White Widow. Every major player in the movie is present, including Alana and Ilsa Faust and Grace, the newest addition to our ever-expanding cast. Everyone is pretentiously discussing the stakes of the film, the significance of the key that everyone's chasing, and something amazing happens in that moment. Do you know what it is? For the first time in 7 movies, Mission Impossible passes the Bechdel test. That is the first time that this series has 2 named female characters who talk to each other about something other than a man.
I don't remember them talking to each other. I remember them all being there.
There are just a few lines of dialogue about basically what Alana is going to do next, what side she's going to pick, and the stakes of the conflict. But that's the first time, with an asterisk, because we're assuming that what Ilsa says to Julia at the end of Fallout is about Ethan and presumably filthy.
Yeah.
Yes. So I have a little Tom Cruise guessing game to discuss how the Bechdel test is passed or not passed by his filmography. We're not going to go through everything. I've just picked out some high points. We should note, of course, the contribution here to the discourse of Alison Bechdel, who kind of codifies. She always defends this and says that it should be called the Bechdel-Wallace test because it is her friend Liz Wallace who comes up with this criteria here, these criteria to discuss whether or not a film is properly representing its female characters, which is a 3-step process. 1, there have to be at least 2 named female characters in the script. They have to talk to each other, and they have to talk to each other about something other than a man.
Wow. It seems like such a low bar, but it's
surprising.
Almost never passed.
Surprising how many films are being released in 2024 that do not pass the Bechdel test.
Yeah.
And we can kind of bracket this out too by saying this is not necessarily feminist discourse. This is more representational discourse,
Yes.
right? The Bechdel test is not supposed to be the be all and end all of whether or not a movie is appropriately feminist.
Right.
It's just an interesting metric by which we can judge our progression in terms of representation and in terms of how we're casting and writing these many, many films that come out every year. So I just have a few here that we're going to run through, and you can guess or tell me for sure whether or not they pass or fail the Bechdel test. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Let's start with Top Gun.
Top Gun.
Does Top Gun pass the Bechdel test?
No.
It does not. Do you know why?
Named female characters.
No, there are named female characters.
I know there's Charlie.
We never remember that Meg Ryan is called Carol, but she is called Carol.
Of course.
And they talk, but
they talk about
Maverick.
Maverick,
yeah. That's it. Yes. So unfortunately, Top Gun fails the Bechdel test. Let's switch out to Top Gun Maverick. Pass or fail?
I think that one might also fail.
Top Gun Maverick, surprisingly, passes the Bechdel test because Penny and Amelia talk for a moment about Amelia's homework and about going sailing. That's it.
Okay.
That's the full extent of it. But it is enough to scrape a passing grade in the Bechdel test. Vanilla Sky. What do you think about Vanilla Sky?
Vanilla Sky.
Do you even remember Vanilla Sky at this point?
I do remember Vanilla Sky. I remember two women definitely. Whether or not they talk about something that's not a man. Ooh, shaky ground.
They do not talk about something other than a man.
Yeah.
They do not, in fact, talk.
They don't talk at all, right?
Two named female characters in Vanilla Sky, but they never have a conversation. Let's switch out to Jerry Maguire.
No, they talk about him all the time.
Just talk
all the damn time.
Yep,
Yep.
That's right. Magnolia.
Probably.
A huge cast, a cast of thousands. Yes, Magnolia does pass the Bechdel test. Julianne Moore and her doctor Diane talk, and then Rose and Claudia talk at the very end of the movie as the Rain of Frogs is falling. Let's ask Tropic Thunder. Let's make this the last one. Tropic Thunder. Does Tropic Thunder pass the Bechdel test?
I don't even remember female characters in
Tropic Thunder categorically fails the Bechdel test because literally the only named female characters in that movie are named for the actors' names in real life. They are all cameos. It's Maria Menounos and it's Tyra Banks and it's Jennifer Love Hewitt. There are no other named female characters in that film at all.
Yeah.
They're all just so-and-so's assistant, so-and-so's secretary, so-and-so's assistant. It's genuinely terrible, which means that Taps is closer to passing the Bechdel test than Tropic Thunder because Taps has at least one named female character. It's pretty grim, honestly.
Yeah.
And it is, I think, a condemnation of Tom Cruise's filmography.
This is something we said early on.
These are films for boys, right?
Yeah, films. That's what I was saying. Movies for boys, or boy movies, is what I called them early on. Yeah.
How do you feel the Mission Impossible franchise has developed in this particular regard? Do you think we're in a better place?
Yeah, I mean, yes, we're getting more women all the time. These women are getting more and more agency all the time, which is great. I like the addition of Paris, of what's her name? Palm
Clementieff.
Palm Clementieff. I like the addition of her into the lineup. So in general, better.
We're still leaning very hard on English women with like real bone structure.
Yeah,
right.
For sure.
Still a lot of that.
Yeah. Well, and Ethan Hunt is a very patriarchal character, but to be fair, he's just as patriarchal with Benji and Luther as he is with these women.
That's true. It's complicated, right? Because this is the film that passes the Bechdel test for the series, but it is also the film that introduces a new female character who exists solely to be fridged in order to motivate Ethan.
Fridged.
We flash back to introduce this character. Yes, Gail Simone's famous Women in Refrigerators essay, which is I'll link to in the show notes and is well worth reading because it's just as relevant today as it was when she wrote it.
It is, yeah.
In aggregate, though, I think it's kind of hard to come down with a considered opinion on Dead Reckoning because this is a film built up of so many fragments. It's
such
so
a mess.
Many pieces.
Someone just dropped the puzzle box all over the floor.
Which makes a lot of sense when we move through the production story. Let's get to that, in fact. But first, would you like to encapsulate this entire film in like less than 30 seconds? That seems easy. Right? I'll put the entity drone behind it for you, just so that you feel settled.
In October of 2023, a project was begun. The last star in Hollywood, clearly affiliated with the queer socialist left, launched a campaign to take seriously the career of an actor most people have disavowed. Now, nearly 1 year later, they will attempt to come to terms with that career. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, sit through 70 goddamn hours of podcasting about this man, endure relentless flirting, absurd trailer games, and pretend that the definitive list of Tom Cruise movies means anything at all. On today's show, how many stunts is too many stunts? Why are there green smoke bombs? What happened to the rest of the script? And can we talk about the hot bisexual energy between Haley Atwell and Vanessa Kirby? Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning.
I feel seen. I feel attacked. We've done everything we need to do.
It's all just been so much. I'm cracking at the seams just a little bit now.
We are kind of falling apart.
We're a little falling apart.
We've also
here
had
at
a
the end.
very busy production schedule leading up to these last episodes.
Yes, absolutely.
We will, I promise you, talk about the hot bisexual energy that runs through the heart of this film. It's maybe my favorite thing about it.
It is.
We'll get there, but we have to begin at the beginning because the timeline for this one is unusually influential. Mission Impossible Fallout comes out in July of 2018 when Cruise is already 2 months into shooting Top Gun Maverick. In January of the following year, while Cruise is still shooting Top Gun Maverick, Tom Cruise announces via the cursed salted earth that used to be called Twitter that the next 2 Mission Impossible movies would shoot back to back and they would be released in the summer of 2021 and the summer of 2022. Christopher McQuarrie was to write and direct both, and enfolded in every syllable of this declaration is the idea that this would be the end. This would be Cruise's terminal run as Ethan Hunt. He was, at the time that he made this announcement, 57 years old. He had been making Mission Impossible movies for 23 years.
Damn.
That's a long damn time.
Yeah.
Contrary to reports, McQuarrie doesn't write this film by himself. He works with longtime friend and collaborator Eric Jendrison, who broke into the industry writing on Band of Brothers back in 2001. It's unclear how much of the actual script should be credited to Jendrison. He describes himself as someone McQuarrie can bounce story ideas and story structure off of, which means that I would like an explanation for this film, please, because if that's your job, you clearly have not done it very well. In February of 2019, Rebecca Ferguson announces her return. In September, Haley Atwell and Pom Klementieff are announced. In December, Simon Pegg says he's returning. Shea Wiggum says that he's joining in December too. In January, Nicholas Hoult is cast as the villain of the piece, along with the return of Henry Czerny and Vanessa Kirby. Now, this is important because we are at this point about to start shooting the movie in February of 2020, February 20th, 2020. In fact,
I remember that time.
Production,
that was a tough time.
Right?
Yeah.
Production sets up in Venice. They plan on shooting for 3 weeks before moving on to Rome, but on March 9th, the Italian government institutes a quarantine due to the spread of COVID-19, and everything is shut down. They took it very seriously in Italy, too. They had to. It was a terrible, terrible situation in Italy. So they shut down hard right there at the beginning of March. So we've got roughly 3 weeks of shooting done. We've got 3 weeks in the can, and then everything falls apart. Nobody shoots anything for 3 months. During this time, Nicholas Hoult leaves the production because of pre-existing commitments. He is replaced almost immediately with Isai Morales. And the casting of Morales,
that seems like such a wild turn.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
And this is where it all starts to fall apart. This is where you can feel the wheels coming off the thing when it's already in production. Remember, they are already shooting.
Yeah.
They replace Nicholas Hoult, charming English guy, with Isai Morales. He's 30. At that point.
Yeah.
So they replace him with the 60-year-old Isai Morales, who it turns out is only 3 months older than Tom Cruise.
He looks fucking great.
He's fantastic.
A beautiful man.
I've done a little bit of research on him because he's not an actor that I knew terribly well because he's just kind of been a working character actor through his career. I vaguely remember him from like 90s cop dramas, right? So I went back and looked at a lot of his filmography and just kind of scrolled through IMDb, and that man gets hotter every single year of his life.
Awesome.
About 20 years from now, some kind of cult is going to form around him because he's going to be absolutely unstoppable. What's wild is that the casting of Morales gives McQuarrie some interesting ideas about tying together the histories of Ethan Hunt and Gabriel, the antagonist. And this is where he comes up with the idea for the entity, this real antagonist underlying the movie, which forces us to ask, when we consider that he came up with all of this.
So when they started the movie,
what the hell was your movie about, my dude?
Oh my God.
It must have been completely presumably
on the fly.
The chase for a key, right? Like the artifact, the MacGuffin can still remain. But everything else, like the underlying story principles, have to be completely altered. They have to be transformed before we go back into photography. In July, filming begins at the Warner Brothers set in Leavesden, England. In September, they shoot in Norway, which is where we do most of the exteriors of the Orient Express sequence.
Beautiful.
They start shooting again in Italy and are again immediately shut down, only to reopen a week later. In December, they move studios in England. The whole crew flies out to Abu Dhabi in the UAE. In February, the whole production moves back to London for finishing touches, quote unquote, a sequence which lasts for 7 months.
Oh my God.
It is at this point, when we return to London and start this phase of finishing touches, that we cast Rob Delaney, Charles Parnell, Greg Tarzan Davis, Indira Varma, Mark Gatiss, and Carrie Elwes. What is your film? This is a film that is constructed, and we know this with absolute clarity, in the editing room.
Oh my God.
I cannot imagine what this was like to actually produce. Principal photography
Actual,
now cut,
like
right?
bad shivers. Just,
Right?
Oh no.
It feels
The
bad.
stress in my body.
I've done a little bit of logistical planning for shoots. I've put together shooting scripts. I've put together outlines. This freaks me out. Principal photography, now cut down from 2 complete movies to 1 and a bit movies, concludes in September of 2021, 22 months before the movie is finally released. That is a long post-production process, which makes sense given how much the story had to be built in the edit and how many digital shots there are and how we have to digitally compensate for the absence of actors in real sets. It's tough. Let's talk a little about what I think is a genuinely very great cast. We just have a lot of new additions, all of whom are bringing the heat. Let's talk first about Pom Klementieff, who was born in Quebec City in Canada in 1986 to a Korean mother and a Russian-French father. Because her father was working in the French diplomatic service at the time, she holds French citizenship rather than Canadian. Her early life is shadowed by tragedy, including the deaths of her father, the uncle who raised her following the death of her father, and her brother.
Jeez.
After dropping out of law school, she begins acting in Paris at the Cours Florent School. She's only been there for a few months when she wins a theater competition and earns 2 years of free classes with the best acting teachers in France, all of whom fate her, all of whom are just wild about this unusual, quirky, spiky, provocative talent. She shoots a couple of French films and then breaks in Hollywood with Spike Lee's somewhat unnecessary remake of Old Boy in 2013. She moves to LA and continues to work regularly, but really breaks in 2017 with her appearance in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, where she plays Mantis.
Of course she does.
That was the first thing I ever saw her in. I thought she was very bad. I thought that I continue to think that Mantis sucks.
Mantis sucks, yeah.
And it's so funny that now you look back at Guardians Volume 2, a film which I think most people enjoyed when it came out, but all of the signs, all of the clues are there, Mr. Police, because everything that is going to go wrong with the MCU is there in Guardians Volume 2. Everything is ordained there for us to see. She then appears in the 3rd season of HBO's Westworld and is just genuinely brilliant in Dead Reckoning. I think she's so good, so interesting. I think the screen lights up every time she appears. Do you like Pom Klementieff? Do you like Paris?
I mean, we talked about the problems with the character a little bit earlier, like her being fridged, as you said, there towards the end. And I don't think that she makes any goddamn sense when
she survives.
She's sure. But the whole, he saved me, and therefore the AI knew. It's all just so convoluted and stupid. But she, I think, is great. I really do think, she's got something for sure. And spunk, I think, is a good word for it.
Yeah, she makes so many choices as an actor. Every time the camera is on her, she is doing something that is like complicated and interesting and is bespeaking a depth and a complexity that
Very
really
expressive
isn't
eyes.
in the rest of the film. Yeah, and it's so charged. Her costuming, I think, is fantastic.
Her costuming is better than anybody else's. I think in general, I'm going to say right now that the costuming really let me down in this one.
I'm startled by that.
Oh, really?
You don't like waistcoats? Because everyone's wearing them. I think there are 4 in this movie, which is a surprisingly high number for a Mission Impossible movie, at least.
It's odd, yeah.
Yeah, no, I generally like, I think, pretty much all of the costuming.
Really?
The women in particular, I think. Yeah, now that you mention it, I'm not sure that I can really get along with Benji's weird thing. He's descended so much further into like his tweedy professorial style that we actually praised in Fallout. Now it's more like a costume.
Yeah. I think it's mostly that I was so looking forward to the gala. As soon as they're like, oh, there's going to be a big gala ball. I'm like, oh. And then there's not a single gown. And again, there is some like cool hot bi girl looks with the weird billowy pirate shirt and the waistcoat.
With Grace's outfit. Yeah.
Grace's outfit is the best one, but what Rebecca Ferguson wears to the gala is unforgivable.
This movie,
not her fault, obviously,
serves Rebecca Ferguson very poorly.
Yeah.
In general, I think Ilsa comes out of this pretty badly.
And Vanessa Kirby, too, just comes out in that like cream suit and it's fine.
It is fine. That's true.
Know?
Yeah, I guess I'm mostly thinking it's mostly Haley Atwell's outfit in that sequence is so wild. Yeah,
it's
her weird
so
pirate corset thing that she's wearing.
And she's just got like a sloppy ponytail. Like I just feel like somebody should have tried a little harder. It all kind of reads like a dress rehearsal. You know what I mean?
Interesting. Well,
like before everything has
no one is at the
really
top of their game
together.
when we were shooting that stuff,
like.
for sure.
Yeah.
I don't
know.
Esai Morales, let's talk a little more about him. He's born in 1962 in Brooklyn. His father was a welder and his mother was a union rep for the Garment Workers Union. Like his mother, he remains active in politics to this day and is one of the founders of the National Hispanic Foundation for the Arts. He attends the School of Performing Arts in Manhattan and moves to LA after graduating. His first major film is Bad Boys. Not the Will Smith one, the Sean Penn one from 1983. He then gets a lot of attention for his role in La Bamba in 1986, right? And from that day to this, he just works and works and works. He's probably best well known for his 66 episode run on NYPD Blue, but the last year without at least one Morales credit listed on IMDb is 1988.
Wow.
That was the last year
works.
that he didn't work.
Okay.
And it's a huge filmography.
Yeah.
It's sprawling, it's varied, it's interesting. And he, I think, has perhaps never been more compelling than he is in Dead Reckoning. I think he brings a lot to this character.
I agree. Yeah, he's lovely. They give him some dumb shit to say, though.
They do give him some dumb shit to say. They give almost everyone some dumb shit to say. They give Rebecca Ferguson some dumb shit to say, which I can't imagine she was happy about. But I do think that Morales delivers on it. I think that, like Clementieff, he manages to give something that is just a little ethereal. It's almost a little unhinged.
Yeah, he has like a dark sparkle. I've been reading some fantasy lately. I've been reading A Court of Thorns and Roses, and I'm on the second one, like Mist and Fury or something, I think. And I could definitely see him being some kind of like dark fairy character. He's got that like glimmer, right?
Yeah, and really bringing energy in a way that I find honestly delightful. I really do think he is great, even when you're right. He has given some dumb shit to say, and he's given some dumb shit to do as well. And made to perform some stunt work that is bad in a way that Mission Impossible has never been.
The worst fight choreography I can remember seeing in a long time.
And it's all of it.
Yeah.
There isn't a single well choreographed sequence. The stunt choreography, I think, remains intermittently great, right?
Yeah.
There are moments that are really fantastic, but the actual physical hand-to-hand fight choreography stinks.
Sucks. Yeah,
absolutely does. The last new actor that we have to talk about, in addition to our, 45 returning actors to this franchise, is, of course, Ms. Haley Elizabeth Atwell. Born April 5th, 1982 in London, she attends Catholic school and then the London Oratory School, then takes 2 years out to travel the world with her photographer father and work for a London-based casting director before finally enrolling at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama, from which she graduates with a BA in acting. She's immediately cast in Prometheus Unbound in the Sound Theatre in London and then works with the Royal Shakespeare Company, then the Royal National Theatre. Her first film role is Woody Allen's Cassandra's Dream, just 2 years after graduating. And from there to here, it is nothing but hits. She's most famous, of course, for her role as Margaret Peggy Carter in, so far, 6 movies, 1 short, 2 TV shows, and 2 voice performances for animated shows.
Good for her.
It's been the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah.
And she keeps on giving. Has there ever been a better performance in the entire MCU than Haley Atwell as Peggy Carter in that first Captain America film?
I really love her. I do. And you know what? I enjoyed Agent Carter. I watched all of Agent Carter.
I watched it twice. Agent Carter too, with Shea Wiggum, of course, who joins the cast.
Yeah.
It's sad that they don't really get a scene together until the very end of the movie, by which time everyone is too exhausted to really invest that with any real meaning or significance. Haley Atwell is also voicing the part of Lara Croft in the upcoming Netflix animated Tomb Raider series, apparently because she is a big fan of Tomb Raider and owns a Porsche-styled pink Xbox. She's just a gamer girl. That's the thing about Haley Atwell.
Well, that's neat.
Her best work, though, as good as she is in Agent Carter, her best work might be the 2017 Howard's End miniseries, which you and I watched together and absolutely adored. She is generally incredible, and next year she's appearing at the Theatre Royal in Drury Lane as Beatrice in Much Ado About Nothing, opposite Tom Hiddleston as Benedict, which is fantastic casting.
In another life, I would love to attend.
We'll note, too, because it's becoming a thing, particularly in the latter era of Tom Cruise's career, she is a full 20 years younger than Cruise. Though I will say, it bothers me less in this film than many other films because I think that she is just such a timeless beauty. She looks like the golden age of Hollywood. I mean, that's why she works so well as Peggy Carter, because she looks like the hottest woman in the 1940s, right?
Yeah, but they're also not really putting them together romantically, it didn't seem to me.
We can't because of Ilsa.
Rebecca Ferguson and Ilsa,
that body's still warm.
Yeah.
But it's pretty clear that that's what we're leading to in the next one. We'll see how it works out.
Okay.
But I do think that they have good, companionable physical chemistry, particularly the chase sequence through Rome, which is otherwise
I thought they were never better than the
exhausting.
first introduction in the airport.
Sure. Also very fun.
They were great there.
Yeah.
She was great. I think I was just so enamored of her right away. So maybe Cruise wasn't doing as much, but I liked her so well.
It's outright. I know we were talking to each other as we were watching the film, so I'll just repeat this for the benefit of the listeners at home. But literally every time there's a cut in the movie and you see her face, you are blown away by how incredibly beautiful she is.
Yeah.
She's just stunning, absolutely stunning. And so playful and flirtatious and really manages to communicate the drama. I think she's a great addition to the series.
I agree.
So let's establish two things. As we move back to the production of the film, let's establish two things right now. The first is that making films is basically impossible under the best of circumstances, and these were absolutely not the best of circumstances. Actors and crew had to navigate those COVID restrictions. Multiple reshoots had to be conducted at multiple locations, often isolated from other people supposed to be present in the same scene. In the library scene, for example, when we first get to Rome and Grace has been arrested, and we go into the library where she meets Cruz when he's pretending to be her lawyer.
Yes,
you remember that sequence?
I do.
They were never in that room at the same time. Those were shot not just independently, but months apart.
Damn,
they are not reacting to each other
tough.
at all, which is why there's a weird energy in
Yeah.
that scene. The second thing that we have to acknowledge right up front is that this film, for large parts of its running time, looks really bad.
Yeah.
There are innumerable lighting choices and compositional choices and editing choices and CGI choices and framing choices in, as we've said, the choreography, the stunt choreography, the fight choreography, choices in setting and location, which are just poorly made.
Yeah.
It feels ramshackle, and God knows it looks uglier than any movie since 2, any Mission Impossible movie since 2. I think when John Woo was leaning so hard into his dramatic excess, and this doesn't even feel as singular as that. It doesn't feel as single-minded as that. There are, I think, 3 reasons for this. The first and most important is the necessity of shooting on studio sets and then stitching the movie together from scraps of principal photography over the course of a year and a half. That's why we have that long post-production sequence. That's kind of a given for movies produced in 2020 and 2021. But there are specific problems here too. This is the first Mission Impossible film that is shot with digital camera technology. It's previously all been shot on film, but here we use Sony's Cinealta Venice cameras, which have been used for some parts of Top Gun Maverick, but which Macquarie has never used before. There's a list on IMDb of maybe 60 movies that have been shot with these particular digital cameras, and I'm going to say that only 2 or 3 stand out as good-looking films. Most notably, the aerial shots in Maverick, where you have to use digital technology because you cannot shoot the aerial stuff on film because of space restrictions. And Michael Mann's Ferrari. But Michael Mann, as we noted back when we discussed Collateral in the series, he can make digital work for him because he leans into the griminess and the grunginess and the artificiality of it all in a way that Christopher McQuarrie does not. He kind of behaves like he's still shooting on film, but without the strengths either of film or digital, it seems to me. The other problem here is cinematographer Fraser Taggart, who up to this point is largely a second unit DOP on movies like The Da Vinci Code and Stardust and Edge of Tomorrow and Rogue Nation. He is credited as, quote, additional director of photography on Fallout, because it said that he's the cinematographer for the helicopter chase scene at the end of that film. He's been the cinematographer on only 2 feature films before Dead Reckoning. Dead Fish, released in 2005, and Robot Overlords, released in 2014, with an estimated budget of $15 million and $21 million respectively, which means that it is easy to imagine a scenario in which he gets signed up for Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning and finds himself immediately out of his depth. Here's the thing, though. I'm loath to blame Taggart for the way that this film looks, because in an interview with Collider, which I'll link in the show notes, McQuarrie talks extensively about the shoot and says several interesting and damning things, including this, quote, I ended up with a very unusual dynamic with my camera crew on this movie. Fraser Taggart is the cinematographer, Martin Smith is the gaffer, and Jonathan Chunky Richmond is the first camera operator. And we had a very unusual dynamic as compared to other dynamics that I've had before, where we paired off with Martin and Fraser as one pair and myself and Chunky as another, end quote, which, to my reading at least, tells me that Taggart, for all of his title in the credits, was effectively a second unit DOP because McQuarrie was acting as his own cinematographer. And McQuarrie, it hardly needs to be said, has no credits for cinematography, lighting, or camera operation. Does that, to you, account for the way that this film looks?
I mean, it helps. Yeah, definitely.
Because we are just failing at the first hurdle so often.
All the time.
Like, editing choices are bad, yes, but we are presenting raw footage that is just insufficient to the task.
Way too many Dutch angles, just dizzying sometimes, really disorienting. Lighting choices are all over the map. It's underlit several times. It's overlit several times. It's tough.
Shooting from close-ups to mids to wides within the same kind of frame.
Having people speaking lines out of focus in the background. Why are we doing? Why?
We have Tom Cruise in the foreground of some of these shots out of focus.
Ugh.
Like, it's not very out of focus, but once you see it, you can't help but look at it. And we commit the greatest sin in cinema, and the sin that you have the hardest time, I think, reckoning with. We break the line of action constantly. Does that throw you out? Because you've said on the podcast before that you kind of struggle with the 180-degree rule.
Sometimes, yeah.
Is the cinematography here, when we keep relentlessly breaking the line of action, does that bother you? Is it throwing you out? Are you aware of it?
I don't think I was that aware of it. Yeah, it was disorienting sometimes, but more I felt like physically dizzy sometimes.
Sure.
But I was thinking specifically of the fight sequence that's on the bridge that is Gabriel and Ilsa and Grace is
first Gabriel and Grace, and then
bad.
Gabriel and Ilsa.
Yeah. But it's the camera angles to me. It's like somebody designed this fight choreography, but you have to shoot it from angles to make it look real.
Yeah.
And if you shoot it from the wrong angles, you'll just see that these people are nowhere near close to each other, that it's all a dance, you know?
And
we were doing that all the time.
Choices that are absolutely baffling. Where you're literally putting the camera in the worst place to see the choreography that could be much more effective if shot from another angle. The other thing that really stands out to me is that in the club sequence, in the rave gala sequence, we keep shooting Vanessa Kirby from bad angles. She looks bad in that sequence in a way that she just doesn't in the rest of the film, because actors know their angles.
Yeah.
But we keep shooting her from like 3 o'clock and down below her chin line, which is nobody looks good.
Nobody looks good that
nobody
way.
In
Don't
the
do
world.
that. Yeah. You've opened your phone and looked down.
Exactly. You see yourself in the reflection of the black mirror. Yes. The score for this movie is composed once again by Lauren Balfe, who also this year composes on Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves, Tetris, and the Neil Blomkamp Gran Turismo movie.
Okay.
Perhaps the most significant contribution to the sound of this film, though, comes from director Edgar Wright, who was shown an early cut of the movie and suggested that maybe you could use an audio cue to show when the entity is present, because no one had thought of it. So they do. McQuarrie goes back, re-edits the whole film, adds in that thrumming entity sound, and it's everywhere in the film. And it does give the film a unique audio fingerprint, I think. It
cool.
feels purposeful and intentional. And Edgar Wright, of course, just a master of exactly that kind of detail work. Dead Reckoning, then, is finally released on July 12th, 2023. It opens number 1 at the box office with $55 million, which is slightly down on what was predicted. Number 2 that week is Sound of Freedom, the weirdly Christian human trafficking movie with Jim Caviezel. Number 3 is Insidious, The Red Door, the 5th and so far final Insidious movie, though I believe 2 more are in pre-production right now. Number 4 at the box office is Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, an actual, for-real Indiana Jones film, which I have not seen and probably never will. Number 5 is Elemental, a completely middling Pixar movie. It is like if you take all previous Pixar movies and blend them up together and pour out exactly 1 pint, you will get Elemental. It's fine, and you can say nothing more about it than that. Number 6 is Across the Spider-Verse, a really half-hearted follow-up to the very brilliant first Spider-Verse film. That's another one where they're making 2 and 3 kind of together, so we really have to wait for the third one.
That one even.
I would not recommend watching it until the third one comes out. And if the response to the third one is good, then go back and watch the second one. But after the first one, which is so good.
The first one I really enjoyed.
The second one is really, just really half-hearted, like really lackluster. It leans into its worst impulses.
Oh, no.
I think. But maybe that can be rectified. So Dead Reckoning blows them all away and looks poised for a long, successful run at the top of the charts until the following week. In which Oppenheimer makes $82 million and Barbie makes $162 million. And Dead Reckoning slips to number 4 at the box office. They get schooled.
Yeah.
They get taken to lunch by, you're right, by Barbenheimer.
Yes.
A phenomenon that literally everyone saw coming.
Yeah.
Everybody knew that was going to happen. I don't know why Paramount thought that it was a good idea to drop Dead
What else
Reckoning
was
the
around
weekend
there?
before.
It was
nothing else, because everything else got out of the way.
Oh, because I remember that's about when we got Killers of the Flower Moon, right? Wasn't that all shaken up in that same salad bowl?
Killers of the Flower Moon isn't until October. It's months later.
It is. I think it got pushed back. I think you're right. I think there were
lots of things. Lots of things
back.
got out of the way of Barbenheimer, except Mission Impossible. And I don't know if they just thought that they would have a giant opening weekend. I don't know if they thought that they could. Maybe they were just staking their claim so that the release of Dead Reckoning Part 2, which was supposed to be in 2024, right? It was supposed to be a 1-year gap between the two movies, and now it's turned into a 2-year gap.
Oh,
and
God.
honestly, the May release date seems a little soft as well, because they haven't even announced a title for Mission Impossible 8 as yet.
Yeah.
The movie ends up making only $172 million domestically. That's $10 million more than Barbie makes opening weekend. It makes $568 million worldwide, which wouldn't be bad, except for the absolutely ridiculous budget attached to this film, a reported $291 million, making Dead Reckoning the most expensive film that Paramount has ever produced.
Oh, no.
Dead Reckoning makes less at the box office than Mission Impossible Fallout, less than Ghost Protocol, less than Rogue Nation. It makes only $15 million more than the aforementioned Mission Impossible 2.
Wow.
The movie is, though, nominated for Best Sound and Best Visual Effects at the 96th Academy Awards, where it loses to Zone of Interest and Godzilla -1, respectively. Oh, I think Best Sound, it is actually a candidate for Best Sound. I think this movie sounds better than it looks in basically every moment.
Okay, interesting.
Though what's interesting is that this is the first Mission Impossible movie to be nominated for anything at all, which is just accelerating this narrative that's being built about Tom Cruise's inevitable Oscar.
Sure.
And as I say, the movie previously known as Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 2 will be released on May 23rd, 2025. As of this recording, September 18th, 2024. We'll see whether that holds true. So I have two big takes here before we get into our discussion of the beat by beat, because I think there were two different lenses through which we might view this film. One that is charitable and one that is less charitable, but maybe more unintentionally interesting. The first is that this is conscious on the part of the filmmakers. All of these decisions are just deliberate choices to echo everything we've had previously, right? It's the reproduction of earlier movies in the series. We bring back Kittredge. We name check Max again. We bring back Hunt's secret ID code that he gives to the DoorDash delivery driver in the beginning. We bring back close-up magic for the first time since Mission Impossible 1. We bring back the fight on the train for the first time since Mission Impossible 1.
We did close-up magic in Mission Impossible 1.
We
with
bring
the
back
done CD or DVD or whatever it was.
The little mini disc, yeah.
The mini disc.
We bring back all of the De Palma
I had forgotten about that.
canted angles and all the saturated light and all those deep, deep shadows. And that's not all, because we bring back elements from other films too. This isn't the first time we've seen Ethan hook up with a hot thief, because that was Tandy Newton in Mission Impossible 2. We're doing an action set piece in this misty European city that's mostly soundstages, just like Prague in the first film. The fight scene on the bridge in Venice is very similar with stuff that we get from Kristen Scott Thomas right at the beginning of Mission Impossible 1. You remember when they're hiding after the mission goes wrong? The mask machine breaks halfway through conveniently for the plot, just like Ghost Protocol, just like Fallout. There's a sandstorm, just like Ghost Protocol. And we're getting, of course, the Tom Cruise run and motorcycle chases and all the high points of the franchise so far. And it even feels a little bit, I don't know, this is soft perhaps, but it feels a little bit like we're folding in other parts of McQuarrie's history with Cruise. Because the very beginning of the movie, where we establish an actor speaking in Russian and then move smoothly into English, is exactly the same as Valkyrie. Yeah,
I noticed that.
Even the sandstorm effects that I mentioned when we're out in the Arabian desert feel more like The Mummy than they do previous Mission Impossible movies, like the Burj Khalifa sequence or the post-Burj Khalifa sequence in Ghost Protocol. Right? So it feels like we're, to some extent, playing the hits.
Sure, yeah.
Alternatively, it feels like we're scraping the barrel. One of those two metaphors is more appropriate than the other.
Yeah.
Does it feel to you like a mishmash of previous Mission Impossibles?
A bit it does, yeah.
Which
particularly, I do see the callbacks to the first one, and that there's like much more silliness in this one. But I think that all falls really flat. Like, they try to be funny a lot of times, and it does not work for me. Like, they do gags in this movie in a way that they haven't since,
including what is for me the worst moment in a Mission Impossible film,
which is
the Fiat 500 tumbling down the Spanish steps in Rome. And
then they've switched
Ethan and
places.
Grace switching places inside of the car. And both doing like the biggest Looney Tunes cartoon takes That's garbage. What are you doing?
No,
If
nothing
physical
about
reality
the
doesn't
car
hold
sequence.
true in this universe, then there's
Yeah.
no point doing anything.
Yeah, none of it works. I completely agree.
It's wild. There is, though, another way of looking at this, and I cannot imagine that this is intentional, but if it is, it's one of the most audacious bits of screenwriting that I've ever seen in my life, because everything that I just said, taking all of these aspects of previous Mission Impossible movies and smooshing them together and generating a new Mission Impossible movie, well, that's what large language models do. That's what AI does. We are seeing, in effect, something that feels a lot like the first artificially generated Mission Impossible movie.
That's so weird.
Just take everything that we've seen before, rearrange it, chop it up, mix it and screw it, and then put it out. It feels like, I'm sure that it's unintentional,
but
it feels as though this could be a commentary on artificial intelligence in the first place.
It is an interesting idea. There's no way they did it on purpose because that's too big a risk for millions and millions. Yes. But I do like the way that you're looking at that. Yes. And I didn't know that this was an AI story, so it came out pretty quickly that it was. But that surprised me. But to me, it just made the whole movie feel like Bad Bond from like early 90s.
It does feel like Bad Bond. There's even a line of dialogue that reminded me of Bond when Gabriel talks about disappearing like smoke in a hurricane.
Yes.
Which is just echoing Blofeld's, dancing like a kite in the hurricane. That's a very specific kind of bit of language that is being replicated very close.
The scene is the most Bond. Yeah. It feels very villain's lair. It feels the AI presence behind him reminds me of the Brosnan one with all the satellites, and
you could be talking about Goldeneye. You could be talking about Tomorrow Never Dies.
I think
you're talking about Elliot Carver.
Elliot Carver is what I'm talking about. Yes, it reminded me of that gala. The
newsroom. Yeah.
Only nobody looked as good as they did
as Terry Hatcher.
Yeah, as Terry Hatcher. Yeah, absolutely.
Nobody looks as good as Terry Hatcher. It's just a thing we have to accept and move on with our lives in this dull and diminished world. I do think it's interesting to constantly try to think about this film, and this is worthless, right? In terms of film criticism, in terms of how you respond to this movie as an artifact, as a unit of story, it's worthless to try and do this. But it is interesting to try and remember that this is conceived as one half of a two-part finale, right? That this is possibly reflective of what has come before so that we can break the mold and anticipate what comes next. You're right that I also learned early after the film came out that it was an AI story. And I expected that to honestly just be more interesting because functionally it's not an AI story. It's a story about something that can perfectly see the future, right? It's a story about a clairvoyant who understands what is going to happen and can see all the permutations, right? Which, I mean, we're also coming back to the big Avengers sequels, and we're coming back to Doctor Strange looking into the future and seeing the one path to navigate the timelines to beat Thanos in Infinity War and Endgame. That feels a little familiar. But what the AI can do in terms of interposing itself between us and the world, because so much of our reality is digital now.
Yeah.
The AI can do interesting things in terms of manipulating us, and we kind of get nods to that, and we get a couple of interesting moments, right? I think of the entity taking over Benji's voice and navigating Ethan incorrectly through the streets of Venice. That's a really good moment. And even the way that we're having Gabriel appear and disappear in the airport at the beginning of the film kind of works. But we don't really take that very far because we've just got too many bodies on screen. We're just dealing with this giant ass unwieldy cast that we then have to stuff onto the Orient Express just so we can have a closed off finale.
Yeah.
Let's get into it and run through this movie, shall we? We open on the Sevastopol, a Russian submarine beneath the Arctic ice. They are testing an active learning system, a kind of AI contained in the sonar sphere, right? Which looks A, like Cerebro from X-Men.
I was going to say...
B is actually what sonar spheres look like.
Real?
I have no idea.
Really?
Yes, I went and looked it up. That is just basically, that is a sonar sphere.
See, the thing about the whole submarine sequence is that it all looks like it could have been a throwback to World War II. Like, nothing looks state of the art. They're telling me it's state of the art, and I'm like looking over my shoulder, like, is this a joke? Are we gonna? Is there gonna be a little chyron that's like, And it was really state of the art for 49. That would be amazing.
Would have been awesome,
right? But then when it's just like, oh no, this is the best we could do, I was like, oh.
It also would have made more political sense because what we have is the shadow of a U.S. Virginia-class submarine appearing on their sonar. And then they just immediately go to battle stations. The American submarine, which turns out to not really exist, but as far as they are concerned, this real American submarine opens fire.
Yeah.
And nobody blinks. Nobody says, what the hell? Are we in the world of Mission Impossible?
Yeah.
Is the US at war with Russia? Like, is this just, are we engaging in open hostilities?
Wild.
Do submarines in the real world just take potshots at each other when they see each other deep under Arctic ice?
Seems unlikely.
Political reality here is unraveling, which is really disappointing after the good work that we did in Fallout to really kind of work, and I guess going back to Rogue Nation 2, to go back to kind of develop this idea of an international community of intelligence agents and intelligence agencies. Right. All of that has fallen away. We get to a farcical briefing sequence in DC shortly after this, which is just awful.
Awful.
We'll get to all that. Does the submarine sequence work for you just as a piece of filmmaking?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wherefore?
Well, just what I said before. Like, it just doesn't, nothing about it feels real or like it gels together, it fits together. I think the key is a stupid prop. Again, it would have been an awesome prop if this actually, I think if it was an Avengers movie and it's Captain America times or whatever, and we need things to be that kind of steampunky futuristic, but it just is so Catholic looking.
It is weirdly Catholic looking.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
You keep waiting for this film to transition into some kind of religious rhetoric. You keep waiting for someone to do it because we keep talking about the entity as being Gabriel's God, right?
Yeah.
His name is Gabriel. Like,
it is written, he says.
Yeah. We're gesturing towards it, but we're scared of it. We don't want to go any closer than that. Even when it's silhouetted by Hunt's AR glasses in everyone's pocket and it's just a little cross.
Yeah.
It's so weird. It's such a strange choice. Odd. I kind of like the mechanic of the two keys being combined because it is, as you say, replicating that kind of World War II bunker mentality. Sure. The two keys that are required to launch the weapon system. Mm-hmm. I kind of like how that works. I love, honestly, how naturalistic the interior of the submarine looks. But I think you absolutely have to cut this out of the film. You absolutely have to cut this out of the film. Because if you cut it out, what you get at the end of the movie with the reveal of the Sevastopol, like, where is it that Ethan Hunt has to go to save the world? Holy shit. It's a submarine that is at the bottom of the ocean under Arctic ice.
Yeah.
Is a much better reveal
You're right.
than front-loading this stuff. Mm-hmm. I do like how naturalistic the performances are. I like how grounded it is. I like how tense it is. There's something about submarine stories that are always just
tense.
Everything is sweaty. Everything stinks. Like, it's just metal and man. And like, it's engaging stuff. But very, very stressful. And I don't think it earns its place in a very long Mission Impossible movie, to be quite frank. 7.5 minutes that runs, and then we cut out to Amsterdam, where Ethan Hunt is receiving the world's most complicated DoorDash order. Bravo Echo 11 is the security code that Ethan gives back in the first movie, so we're already echoing MI1 there. Then they do the Q&A security challenge. We live and die in the shadows for those we hold close and those we never meet. It is no I am the storm.
I am the storm is better.
I am the storm is better in every possible way. I like that we're recruiting this DoorDash driver into the IMF. That seems fun. I wonder if he's going to come back in 8.
He's like an intern.
Yeah, right. It's your first week. You only have to go and deliver the mission packet. Then we're into the briefing. And did you recognize the voice of Henry Czerny? Did you know that he was back as Kitteridge in this film for the first time since Mission Impossible 1?
No and no. Yeah.
That's fair.
He does have a very recognizable voice. And once I saw him again, I was like, oh, yeah. But it does kind of sound like somebody doing a bit at first until you see him.
Yeah, it's recognizable, but it's also, you're right. It's him kind of leaning into how he sounded in Mission Impossible 1 to make himself more recognizable, I feel like. It kind of works. We unnecessarily sketch Ethan's origin story as an IMF operative, flashing back to see the de-aged Isai Morales killing one of Hunt's classic brunettes with impeccable bone structure.
Right.
McQuarrie's original plan here was for the sequence to be much longer, and spoilers, this actress is returning in the next movie. So we are definitely going to see more of this event, whatever it is. But the plan was to use a digitally de-aged Tom Cruise, which we don't. They apparently shot it and did the editing on it, and it looks weird.
I'll bet.
Tom Cruise just doesn't de-age in the way that Morales, I think, actually looks great in that sequence. I think that's very convincing de-aging. He also wanted to use a digitally de-aged Julia Roberts as the girl who dies.
Interesting.
Seems unnecessary, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm glad he decided not to pay the extra $20 million to get Julia Roberts on set and then digitally de-age her. Like, instead we get this other actor who is just fine and was presumably paid scale. Like, I can't imagine it was much more than that. Are you at this point mad at a woman being fridged in order to motivate Ethan's backstory, or is this just, are you just exhausted?
Mostly just exhausted. But yeah, we talked last time about how McQuarrie had said he didn't want any women to be put into harm's way to motivate a man.
Yeah.
And all four women are
depending how you count Alana, yes.
Yes, are in this film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He kind of sold out his own principles, which is kind of a shame because not only does he say that he wants to do that in Fallout, he does it very effectively.
Yeah.
And Fallout is all the better for it.
Much better.
It's a much stronger story, particularly because these women aren't damsel. I think it sucks. I am really just primarily exhausted by it.
Yeah.
But goddamn, Ethan Hunt is the last person on Earth who needs this because yes, we didn't see the tragic death that caused him to join the IMF in the first place. But in Mission Impossible 1, the IMF is not what it is now, right? We've, again, massaged the reality surrounding Ethan Hunt to make it this weird underground structure where even the head of the combined American intelligence service, a position that does not in real life exist, Carrie Elwes doesn't know about the IMF, but every other person in that room does.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
I struggle to make sense of
this
any
whole
of it.
everything that happens in this room is bad, though. None of it makes sense. They share clunky expository. We're not even there yet. I'm sorry.
We're not even there yet.
You're right.
Because we still have to finish up the briefing. There's the mysterious cruciform key. Ilsa killed a courier in Istanbul and has one half. Ethan has to go after her in the Arabian desert. So we do this whole sequence in the desert that looks like garbage.
It looks really bad. And once again, I don't want assault rifles in my Mission Impossible movies. I don't want them.
And here's the thing. It's worse when it is so weirdly bloodless.
Yeah.
It feels like a
video game. 100% Call of Duty.
And this is really where we are breaking the line of action. Just too often. Like, it is impossible to build a spatial geography. There's one moment when it feels as though Hunt is like in the room next to Ilsa, but then she is still firing through her sniper rifle and taking out people that are in fistfights with him. I'm at a loss.
Yeah. And it all looks like very bad, cheaply made community theater sets.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, worst of all, we do a stupid, pointless fake out and pretend that Ilsa has died.
Yeah.
Garbage.
Only to kill her later.
Yeah, only to kill her later. Yeah. Well, I think that this is maybe part of the twist here because it had been leaked or rumored at least that someone was going to die. So I can imagine trying to drop this in as a misleading element in the first action of the movie. But this is a cast of thousands.
Yeah,
people have to leave this film at this point because it's just getting too crowded. So then we cut out to the briefing scene back in DC where 1 ton of exposition is delivered by actors who are generally too good for this.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this question. Are you more distracted by Rob Delaney or Mark Gatiss in this scene? Who is a worse fit? I think I agree.
Yeah.
Though Rob Delaney gets a very important exposition line toward the end of the scene and delivers it with his trademark smirk, which completely undercuts the seriousness of the moment, to be fair. The entity, we learn, is an AI that has penetration tested all of the American intelligence infrastructure to demonstrate its own existence and deliver an implicit threat. Technology is no longer safe. Information is the tool of the enemy, but maybe we don't have to kill it. Maybe we can control it. Kitteridge returns and tells Denlinger, that is Carrie Elwes' name in this movie.
Denlinger?
Denlinger.
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 Okay. All right.
Just want to say that a few more times, just because that's not a name that you should give anyone in a script. He tells Denlinger about the key and that everyone is competing to recover it for control of the entity. And all of this time, character actor Marcello Walton is lurking in the corner of the room, refusing to blink, dead-eyeing the camera the whole time.
Yeah.
At what point did you know that it was Hunt?
Pretty early.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, I mean, anytime they've got that person who's of less than average height in the background, you know what I mean? You're just waiting.
Just a short king standing unnecessarily close to you? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I'll admit, in this instance, I did not guess that it was him until he literally pulled the mask off because I was just waiting for something wilder. I was waiting for something more interesting because what would you gain from having Ethan Hunt in this room except, it's another exposition scene.
Yeah.
It's another opportunity for people in this scene to tell each other things that they already know.
Yeah.
It's banana.
Yeah. And then smoke bombs.
Do you like the smoke bombs?
No, I don't like the smoke bombs. Of course I don't. They're terrible. Why are they this noxious deep green?
Why is this room...
Why are they also kind of poison?
Why is this room overlooking this bullpen where all of these people are working on manual typewriters? Consolidating all the information that the intelligence services know to be true.
Willy Wonka.
But
like,
nobody
I want them to be unwrapping candy
turns
bars.
around and looks up and sees the green smoke filling the director's office.
They're very busy.
You'd think that someone would say something, though, right? Security, perhaps, not the strong suit of whatever mysterious building this is supposed to be. Kitteridge takes a phone call, but Hunt has a Kitteridge mask too, so he tracks the real Kitteridge, and we crash to credits. It's 28 minutes of prologue.
Ooh.
And I think
Too many
that
minutes.
you need
That's an act.
none of it.
That's an act.
It's wild.
Ooh.
I will admit, I genuinely love the Kitteridge mask. I think that Henry Czerny does such a good job where he turns around as Ethan as him and just kind of looks like an asshole. And it's really good in that moment.
Sure.
Everything else, I think you can pretty much cut. There are just too many people in this.
Yeah.
Great actors. Charles Parnell is here. I think really great actors in this sequence. But wow, this is gibberish. It also takes everyone forever to say anything.
Yes.
I know that you are particularly fond of Luther in this film, that you are particularly fond of Ving Rhames' performance in this movie. And watching it for the second time, because yes, listeners at home, I watched this movie twice to prep for the show. Watching it the second time, I think you're completely right. I think his warmth is really necessary.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it does a good job to
He's like
balance
the only
film
heart
out.
in the movie.
Exactly right. Yeah, because Simon Pegg is a little too frayed and a little too frantic. Simon Pegg, of course, when he was shooting this, was very publicly struggling with his alcoholism. He was really going through a very tough
COVID was
time,
tough for a lot of people.
Which is why he looks like he's aged 10 years since the last movie. He's not looking as young as he once did in this film. But Ving Rhames does a lovely job. But my problem there is that Luther takes forever to say a line of dialogue. And it is just the worst thing to sit through. But this scene, far worse than that. After the credits, we are introduced to Shea Whigham and Greg Tarzan Davis, previously seen in Top Gun Maverick, of course, as Briggs and Degas, two members of a team sent to get Hunt, who Whigham describes with fantastic hyperbole. It's a real Alec Baldwin manifestation of destiny kind of moment, right? Do you remember what it is that Shea Whigham says?
I remember part of it. Only because I wrote it down. So I wrote down shape-shifting incarnation of chaos, which is, whoa.
That's the end of it. This is the full quote. He describes Ethan Hunt as, quote, a master of infiltration, deception, sabotage, and psych warfare. For all intents and purposes, ladies and gentlemen, a mind-reading, shape-shifting incarnation of chaos. Please.
Awesome.
Please.
Tom Cruise wrote that himself. Did you say this about me?
Again, right? It is absolutely going back to Hunley. It kind of works better when Alec Baldwin says it.
Because he's such a fanboy.
He's in the Church of Hunt at that point, right? This is one of the very few times in my life when I'm going to say, this should have been Jeremy Renner. The Shea Whigham character should have been Brandt. It should have been William Brandt. He should have been leading the task force because that's kind of the position that he holds in the CIA.
Yeah.
And he knows Hunt. It makes sense for him to be this hyperbolic. And he kind of looks like Shea Whigham. Like these two guys could play brothers in something. I think that it would have worked. And I wonder if there was ever a discussion about him returning to the franchise.
Maybe.
Only to be shown up again by Tom Cruise, which maybe would be a little unwelcome for Renner. From there, and I'm not going to call this out every time that it happens, but from there we get another exposition scene. This is our introduction to Benji and to Luther. And this is the worst edited scene in the entire film. It is a conversation scene with three actors present who are clearly all present in the same room. And we are cutting in the weirdest, most like distancing and upsetting way. It is physically disorienting, which is insane for three people who are sitting still through the entire conversation. It's just crazy. We're also passing the key back, the half of the key back and forth. And every time we do it with this swooping camera move.
Yeah.
This is Macquarie holding this digital camera for the first time and doing whatever the hell he wants with it.
Yeah, mistakes.
He did admit after the fact that he was using the canted angles deliberately, but he didn't realize until he got into the editing room how many he had used or how extreme they were.
Yeah.
Which is why the entire film, you know what it is? It reminds me of Kenneth Branagh's original Thor movie. The first Thor movie in the MCU.
Yeah, that was very canted also. Yeah.
Everything is like 40 degrees canted. And
yeah.
It's just unwatchable because of that.
Yeah. And I see what he was thinking of, like, oh, comic book panels, they'd look like this. And they do.
Yeah.
But
not all the time. You have to establish a visual language so that you can subvert it like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of wild. And yeah, just a product, I think, of Macquarie being a little too close to this production and not having trusted people around him to say knock it off. And I really wonder how much that's a consequence of COVID protocols as well.
Yeah,
if you can only have
true.
6 people on set and 3 of them have to be actors,
you're
not necessarily going to have the lighting team, the camera ops, like
that's
experienced voices around you to say, no, actually, maybe we should shoot from here. Maybe we should hold the camera still. Maybe this is a bad idea. Maybe we shouldn't be looking directly up Tom Cruise's nose. Maybe we shouldn't be cutting from this close-up on Cruise to a mid of Cruise and half of Ving Rhames just so we can see that Luther is holding the key, a fact that we established in literally the previous shot.
Yeah.
It's amateur hour. Gabriel, meanwhile, arrives at the airport and checks a bag. We call out Luther's hacker aliases. That's another thing calling back to the first movie. All that stuff about being the freak, about being the net ranger, all of that is in the first movie and then never mentioned again because it's kind of cringy. Even in 1996, it sure is how cringy here in 2023. And then we scatter. Wiggum and his team are distracted by the fake Hunt and then fall for exactly the same trick again because you got some learning to do. Meanwhile, we're introduced to Grace, who pickpockets the other half of the key, which turns out to not be the real other half of the key from the courier that they're supposed to meet. We'll find out later who hired her and why. Benji starts his side quest to check out Gabriel's checked bag, and Hunt follows Grace, catching up with her in the restaurant. And we get a moment that I think is really extremely good. That moment where he taps her on the shoulder, steps around her so that when she turns back around, he is just in her face.
Yeah.
I really like that. I really like their chemistry. I think they are great together. I think Haley Atwell is brilliant.
Yep.
And
I love her outfit here.
Physically, the closer Tom Cruise is to her, the better he is in this film.
Yeah, I think
with the exception of everything in the Fiat 500.
They're good together because they both have that like deep, sad eye thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Which is increasing in Cruise's depiction of Ethan Hunt as we move forward through this franchise.
Definitely.
Yeah. And she just impresses you right from the jump. Is there a moment when you're not sure about her? She just shows up?
I think that both she and him struggle to land the comedy of the Fiat scene, which should not exist.
Yeah.
But, it should not exist. So maybe I don't lay that at their feet.
No, it's hard to blame them for what is a failure of choreography more than anything else, right? I think that
well, and concept.
That kind of comedy really relies on the fine detail of its execution, and this is not a movie about the fine detail of execution at this point. No. Benji finds his weird Da Vinci Code cryptex and answers the mysterious questions, which
this is stupid. Everything about it is dumb, but at least it takes forever.
To coin a phrase. Yes, exactly right. Grace and Hunt, meanwhile, go after the buyer, but he's quietly assassinated by Paris, who shows up in this movie like she owns it.
Yeah.
She's fantastic.
She's cool.
Wiggum's team closes in. Benji finally unlocks the cryptex, only to discover that it was a feint. Grace disappears with the key. Hunt catches a glimpse of Gabriel, prompting him to terminate the mission and shut the thing down just in time for a chase to break out. Tom Cruise runs a lot.
There's a lot of Tom Cruise running. Yeah.
We get three or four distinct sequences of him running. Yeah, it's kind of wild. We get, I think, maybe the most beautiful shot, which is him running
through the candles.
Yes, through the candles in Rome is so good.
It's a little bit underlit, but yes, beautiful. You get that digital graining that I don't like.
That's so interesting. I didn't notice it in that scene, but that's not normally a thing you're very sensitive to.
The candles look beautiful, but he looks grained out.
I was looking at the candles.
His skin matches the wall in a way that's really like... You know what I mean?
There is some really weird color grading. Again, just lighting and color choices through this film that just, it's not hanging together. It's not as polished as it should be. Back in DC, Kitteridge introduces Derlinger to the state-of-the-art 1970s mission control that they are using for safety from the entity. And then we cut out to Rome for the first half of the second act. Some of this stuff is really great. I like how Rome looks, though. I'm constantly comparing it to Paris from Fallout.
Well,
because Paris looks so gorgeous.
Paris looks so much better. And also we do the going the wrong way in a roundabout thing.
Yeah, we do a lot of the same
so
beats.
Much more effectively in Fallout that it seems really like silly here.
I really like this sequence with the Italian police chief and Grace as we cut to it so hard. We don't get any preamble about it. She is just already arrested, already sitting at his desk, already taking his questions. She is so cool, but Haley Atwell manages to communicate that thing that we are seeing a skilled liar lie,
right?
But she is also communicating to us, though not to the people in the room, how much pressure she's under.
Yeah.
I think that it really, really works. And I like
and
this
lifting
actor
the paperclip is nice.
Yeah, it's a really, really good little moment that we're obviously foreshadowing exactly what's going to happen. And lo and behold, that's exactly what happens. Gabriel shows up first to intimidate the police chief, though, and to find the key, though we cut away from that to Grace in the library with Hunt. And if you're ever unsure, unsure whether two actors are in the same space and how important chemistry is, just go and watch that scene because these two are doing their best. They really are. But there's just no spark there. There's no magic there at all. We learned that Grace was hired electronically. Whoever hired her knew that Hunt would be there. She's supposed to deliver the key to Venice, which will set up the next phase of our story. Ethan pulls the gas grenade trick again, and Grace escapes him by pretending that he groped her. How do we feel about that moment? As they're approaching the elevator, she shrieks like he has grabbed her ass. And the very cool Italian men around him kind of hold him back and kind of
Right.
give him a censorious look. Do you like that moment? Does that work for
It
you?
worked for me, actually. Yeah. She was taking control of the situation in the only way that she could, and it worked, and it was smart.
Yeah.
And you get the little wink, and
I don't mind
think
it.
it's good.
And again, great character actors that we've got
Yeah.
filling out this scene. I really like how they
And I
all
like how
look.
Ethan Hunt is like, how do I fix this? Nope.
Yep.
She fucked me.
Just
this
can't
is
do it.
unfixable.
There's no way back from this. Let me check my watch. Oh, it's 2024. No, I can't come back from this, even in Italy.
Exactly.
So she drives off in a police car and he drives off in a motorcycle, and Paris arrives in an armored truck and Shea Wigham's in a sensible sedan because he's still Shea Wigham. Grace and Ethan end up in handcuffs, and we are just going to chase around the streets of Rome for the next 15 minutes. It's a full 15-minute, well, not even a 15-minute chase scene. It's a series of chase scenes.
Yeah, we start with the car that has the doors knocked off.
Yes.
And that's when I said to you, I thought that this was a yellow car. I seem to remember from a bunch of
apart from the
promos
motorcycle jump,
that I saw a yellow car a lot.
It's the little yellow car.
And then we find the Fiat. I'm like, oh, there it is. And then I was really excited for everything that happened next, and none of it was good.
There is a moment, there's one moment when they get into the car for the first time and he puts his foot down and they crash immediately into the wall and he apologizes. And it's Tom Cruise, really, it feels like Tom Cruise in that moment, just being like, this has gone wrong and I'm sorry and I'm supposed to be a professional and I'm the world's most intense man and I'm trying to take care. But you know, it's how they set it up. Sometimes they just set it up wrong and it just takes me a moment to, it really feels authentic in that moment. But it's really nice. And Hayley Atwell gets to be warm to him.
She was lovely in that moment. You know what? You're right. I did like that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But from there, it all goes crazy. Let's do
you
high
needed to
points.
leave it then and then go back into capability, but instead they just kept on playing it for comedy, and after a while it wasn't working anymore, and then it just feels slapsticky.
And her capability is erratic. Sometimes she's extremely capable and then she'll just step right out of it, and sometimes he'll be really great but also not consistently. It doesn't stay at one level or even like maintain a regular increase or decrease in tone through the sequence as a whole. High points for me though, Tom Cruise's waistcoat. I mentioned earlier how many vests there are.
Tom Cruise does have a good waistcoat here. His look right here is good. Yeah,
great.
he looks great.
I'm surprised. I thought that I had remembered from the promotional material seeing him in his vest and her in her vest in the haltered top that she wears later on the Orient Express.
Train.
Which is maybe my favorite outfit in the whole thing. Also, I will note how great it is. I think she wears 3 distinct outfits in the course of this movie, and they are all panted. She wears pants the whole time, which
she does.
I kind of like. I just think that's
again,
an interesting
my
approach.
girly side, I always want to see like the big flowy gown, I was kind of sad that I didn't get one. But you know what? That's okay. It's all right.
I also like Pom Clementieff's deranged glee behind the wheel of the armored police truck is so fun.
I like that less, but okay.
And I just love Hayley Atwell's entire deal. The low points for me, everything to do with the Spanish steps. Like all of that CGI looks bad. All of the compositing is bad. The digital insertion effects on the windshield look bad because of course we're not really going to drive a car down the Spanish steps. There is a very particular disclaimer, in fact, in the credits. It's almost the last credit right at the end of the movie where they say, no, we definitely did not drive a car down the Spanish steps. Don't be ridiculous. Which is good to know. And then yes, the dumbest joke, the worst joke in a Mission Impossible movie, maybe in the entire Tom Cruise franchise, maybe in the entire filmography, is them switching places in the car like it's a cartoon.
Yeah.
Just
bad
call.
Yeah.
They wind up eventually on the subway tracks where Grace escapes because it takes 0 seconds to unpick handcuffs. Just in case you ever need to know that, it takes no time at all. It is a free action, as we say in D&D.
You can also dismantle the steering wheel just as fast.
Absolutely, you can, yes. And teleport to the side of the tracks. Yeah. Although, again, I like the comedy.
All terrible.
But I like the comedy of Ethan walking out of the tunnel, just holding the steering wheel to which he is still shackled. I find that just a little bit funny.
That's better. Yeah.
And then he's reunited with Benji and Luther and Ilsa because I guess no one can follow simple goddamn instructions. Nobody can do as I said, terminate the mission. But here you all are in a panel van. Awesome. We cut out to Venice where we get to do another round of exposition because we just love talking to ourselves in this movie. We're foreshadowing the return of Alana, of course, the White Widow.
Right.
And we do the part where Luther identifies Gabriel in a reflection in the footage taken from the airport.
Yes.
Turns out that Ilsa knows about him too from her friends in British intelligence, or do she? Because that's probably the entity manipulating her too.
Right. It's all a lot.
Do you like the moment that Hunt and Ilsa get to share on the balcony? This sunset moment that is the moment that every single person watching this movie goes, oh, she's going to die. Do you like that little romantic?
Yes, I like their little bit of romance here and their little bit of romance on the gondola. Don't they also get just a moment where they're just There's just something sweet happening. It's a fraction of a second. In general, yes, I have a little note that says that the romance between Ilsa and Ethan is sweet. It's just pure.
So you are buying it at this point.
I am. Yeah.
Okay. From there, we cut out to another of Alana Mitsopoulos' charity raves.
Right.
It's pretty cool having a job that just requires you to throw the most elaborate parties in the world.
Not so bad.
So we have to finalize our thoughts here. Does Grace look great dressed as a sexy pirate?
Yes, she looks great because she's Haley Atwell, but I think it's still a weird choice that I don't like.
I think the sleeves are a little too puffy.
I'm collar is a little too vampire. Like, there's a lot going on.
I like how big that collar is. I think that actually looks cool. But
She looks great. The choice is, to me, bad. It's just bad.
Gabriel's also wearing a vest through this sequence,
Gabriel
right?
looks good,
yes.
I think. He is the only one I think that absolutely looks good at the gala.
That's a hard disagree from me. Paris
looks good
looking
and
like a goth
weird.
punk
like,
sergeant
what are you
major.
Doing? Yes, this is cool. Yeah.
Apparently, the white makeup with the little black tear at the corner of her eye, that was Pom Clementieff's idea. She just did that.
Wild.
It looks amazing.
It looks great. No, she looks great, but she looks like she's at a totally different party that I want to go to, as opposed to the party everyone else is at, which looks, again, like boring and like a dress rehearsal.
Fair.
Where you're looking for notes. And
Paris and Grace are not at the same party.
Right. You know?
Ethan and Ilsa arrive moments before Alana, who takes charge of the situation, as is her way. She's the one who hired Grace. Hunt provides a distraction so that Grace can plant the key in Zola's pocket, which is a perfect bit of close-up magic, except that then she and Ethan spend the next 5 minutes just looking at his pocket, just staring at his pocket every time someone mentions the key. He then Zola proceeds to search Grace in the weirdest way possible, which feels just... There's something about this actor. He's just so slimy. I really don't like him. And it's so weird to see him fondling Grace as he tries to find it. He does. That's true. Yeah. Did you know that the key is the secret to controlling the entity? Have we mentioned that? Have we established that 6 or 7 times already in this film? Yeah. The moment that they do the reveal that the entity itself is present at the party, like whatever that ambiguously and nebulously means or does not mean, the moment that we do the reveal and we see all of that graphic work and we hear that sound just thrumming through the entire party, that I think is awesome.
It is cool. It's just very Bond. It's just not a Mission Impossible movie to me. It's
That's
cool.
Really fair. Yeah. No, I see that. Gabriel shares the entity's prediction that the key will come to him on the Orient Express tomorrow, providing that either Ilsa or Grace die tonight. Alana lets Gabriel and Paris leave, and then Hunt fights his way out as Ilsa escapes into the night, and Grace also does some more close-up magic, which I guess she just learned from Ethan because she was surprised by it before. But it turns out that she can do it.
She went back to her hotel room and just learned.
Practiced all night. You know what? Maybe that's why we like her. Maybe there's a little bit of the try-hard theater kid in Grace, no surname. This, I think, is a really tense sequence. It suffers a little bit because I don't think we're shooting entirely on sound stages, but we are definitely cutting between the streets of Venice and sound stages, which makes sense given the shutdown on the early part of principal photography. But this is where Ethan is chasing Grace through the streets and his audio feed is corrupted, taken over by the entity. The only time that the entity is really present in the film as like an active player. And it really works. And I think that Simon Pegg manages to sell the panic. Luther manages to sell the panic. I think that this whole sequence, because it's something that we've seen so many times, because we're replicating the rooftop chase in Fallout in London, because we're doing the Mission Impossible thing, to have that taken away from us, to see how much we rely on this information, to see how much we rely on simply knowing more so that Ethan can execute this physically impossible task. I think that really works. And then we get into the fight sequence in the alley where he's ambushed by Paris and Paris's buddy, who is unnamed. And it's kind of stylish and it's kind of cool and it's certainly tense. But I think that cinematically, I think it doesn't work. I think it's ugly and it's hard to parse what is happening in this sequence. Would you agree?
Yeah. I mean, it's at this point in the movie, it's hard to keep paying attention even. We get the good run, which is lovely. And just about everything else is tough. I'm just trying to get to the next set piece. And I will admit that when we get to the next set piece, I'm thrilled because I think the Orient Express looks fucking beautiful.
Oh, the next big set piece. Well, yeah. We still have to get through.
The big
Gabriel fights Grace badly on the bridge, and then he fights Ilsa badly on the bridge, and then Ethan runs faster than he's ever run. Do you like the moment where he spares Paris? Do you like this?
I like how claustrophobic that whole fight scene is. It's very unsettling. The lighting is weird choices. But I mean, and I like that he spares her. Except that it's so stupid that later she's like, and therefore I will, what, give up everything? Her character doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
See,
I will
this
say.
I think is interesting, though, because I don't think that it is Ethan saving her that makes her betray Gabriel. I think it is Gabriel telling her that she is going to betray him. I think that he has this narrative, and I'm sure this is going to return in the second half of this two-part duology, because, you know, there's a lot of the entity's predictive power. But every time that we actually see that happen, it's because it's being articulated by someone. It's because people are actually taking action. Gabriel tells everybody that he's going to get the key on the Orient Express, which is the main reason that most of this cast goes to the Orient Express in the first place, right? If he just kept his mouth shut, it would have been fine. If he hadn't said anything about Ilsa or Grace dying, it would have been fine. So he tells Paris that because Ethan saved her life, or because Ethan didn't kill her. Yes, exactly. That she will betray him and then attacks her. And that I read as the motivation for her turn at the end. So I think we're going to be playing some interesting games with prediction and prophecy as we move into the second half of this story.
Okay. Interesting. I would like to see that.
We can't move on without talking about Ilsa's death scene. What do you think? I just can't shake the feeling that Rebecca Ferguson is poorly served by this film.
Oh, she is. Yeah, it's a really disappointing death scene.
Sad.
Yeah, it is unearned. That man got those 2 daggers 4 minutes ago, and now he's acting like they're extensions of his body that he has used every day of his life.
He loves them.
Right?
Though. He loves them.
Dislike.
Yeah.
And she's got a full sword and still loses? Bullshit.
Yeah, she's taken Paris's sword cane. I've wondered for the first time that I watched this film where the hell that came from, and whether it was just something that I had missed. But no, it's Paris has that back in the club, and then she takes it to escape, which is kind of cool. A conservation of weapons happening here. Yeah, she's it's partly that the fight scene is just not very well put together. It's partly that the cinematography isn't serving it very well, but mostly it's that it's kind of dramatically inert.
Yes.
The idea that one of these two women, right, as it's presented by Gabriel, one of these two women has to die in order to motivate the rest of the plot, and I don't care which one it is,
right,
means that we are disengaged from it too. It's taking agency away from Ilsa, who has, throughout the series, displayed admirable levels of agency. She has always done what she wanted.
Right.
And this is removed from her here in the final reckoning. Disappointing, a sad way for Rebecca Ferguson to go out. I have absolutely no expectation that this will be the case. I wouldn't be heartbroken if she came back in 8 and revealed that this was all some kind of trick by British intelligence. But even if she just comes back so she gets a better death scene, that would be fine. But this one does not work, I'm afraid. And it is weird also having Grace present as Ethan is like grieving over the body of this woman who was almost his girlfriend.
Yeah.
Strange stuff. The team reunites at dawn to figure out their plan. We do get that gorgeous shot of Ethan out on the balcony as dawn is breaking over Venice and all that cool blue light. That looks really, really good. And we just do some more exposition. There's a buyer waiting in Innsbruck to take the key, but if Grace wears a mask to impersonate Alana, they could get the key and stop the entity. Ethan offers Grace the choice. Capital T, capital C, a thing that we just invented, but have pretended like it was a thing all along. She can leave her past behind and join the IMF. Weirdly, we make the decision to flash forward through the best possible version of the plan.
Yeah.
Which is not really a thing that we do in Mission Impossible, right?
I don't think so.
To break out of it and have Grace kind of puncture the fantasy of how the heist should go is a weird... I'm not sure really what we're doing here at all, except that we're just maybe relying on footage that we actually have to compensate for footage that we don't have and desperately need. But when we cut back to the safe house, Grace logically and reasonably demands more assurances, and we get, a totemic line from Ethan that he can't promise that she'll be safe, but he can promise that her life will be more dear to him than his own. What do you think of that? Is that cool? Is this an admirable heroic quality?
It's not. I mean, it's an Ethan Hunt quality for sure, and it's why everybody is so loyal to him. But the man needs therapy.
He desperately needs therapy, yes. Oh, the other thing that we have to take care of before we get to the Orient Express is giving Ving Rhames a hall pass so that he can be excused from the rest of the movie on the grounds of not being able to run through the Orient Express. Yeah. Presumably we're foreshadowing something for the next movie in the series here. He also gets this nice scene, and I think this works really well, where he's telling Ethan that he cannot kill Gabriel. And Ethan says that he won't, but then Luther points out that in the moment, you're going to feel differently. When you're looking in his eyes, you're going to feel differently. And is right, is also here. Prophetic is also here, foreshadowing the end of the story, which is, again, interesting, intentional but
Yeah.
interesting period. I think that, we'll wait and see how that pays off in the second film. And that's a wrap for Ving Rhames. I think he's good. You really convinced me that he's warm
lovely
and
in that
this
scene
film.
too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think Haley Atwell is also really delivering in that scene. Just
That
the very
scene between
beginning,
her
I don't know
and
your
Luther?
name. It's
Oh
so
my God.
good. Yeah, they're excellent together.
Yeah. No, you're right. I should have shone a light on that. But
it's all
she's
right.
really, really lovely. And he's so good. There's real chemistry in that room. And it's just, it's very lovely. It's very tender. It's very sad, but it's also kind of forthright in an interesting way. He's not, it's this really interesting characterization of Luther, right? That he will be kind and wise, but he's also not going to sugarcoat anything.
Yep.
He's just going to be blunt with you. And it's really lovely. Ving Rhames has really both risen to meet this character and had this character expand to meet him too. It's nice to see. One more complication before we get to the Orient Express, because the mask machine breaks. So Hunt cannot impersonate Zola, probably because Zola's like a good 6 inches taller than Ethan Hunt, but that's fine. We have one mask and we're good to go.
Yep.
And then we cut out to the Orient Express, which is a gorgeous collection of sets.
Yes. Yeah. This definitely gave me a new life goal to ride on the Orient Express because I didn't realize... I had forgotten that it was still a steam train. Like, I knew that they were still running it, but...
I believe that the real Orient Express in real life is now not entirely a steam train.
It would only make sense.
I think that they do couple steam engines to the Orient Express for certain parts of its run, but this is a very fictionalized version of the Orient Express hasn't run to Innsbruck in real life since 1962. It's actually had numerous different routes through the years.
Well,
but
it looks beautiful.
The romance of it all.
Yes. Yeah. Really incredible.
Production design for days. Production design off the charts, I think. Here,
Agreed.
And it's nice too because the constraints of the train, until we start getting fancy with it, the constraints of the train kind of necessitate a more straightforward cinematic style.
Yeah.
So we kind of lose some of the more idiosyncratic cinematography that we've seen through the film up to this point. We get the scene of Paris dropping onto the train from the bridge, knocking out the engineer, and then going into the baggage car to open a sarcophagus containing Gabriel.
So stupid. Weird coffin thing. Yeah.
What?
Why? I don't know.
Is this just a means of getting him on board the train? Like it's just stowed away as baggage and he's just inside it?
Why can't he buy a ticket?
Why can't the entity buy a ticket for him?
Yeah.
Why does he need to be in a sarcophagus?
Doesn't make any goddamn sense.
Is this a remnant of an earlier version of the story?
Must be.
What is it?
No sense.
So Gabriel wakes from his sarcophagus. He goes to the engine. He destroys the train's ability to slow down while Benji navigates Ethan toward the train on his motorcycle. Again, complicatedly.
Mm-hmm.
For no real reason, we cut into the train where in a scene that is digitally composited, these actors were never there together. Alana and Zola pass Shea Wiggum and Greg Tarzan Davis sitting at the bar so that Degas can have a moment of introspection about whether maybe Ethan Hunt is doing the right thing.
Maybe he's
the real hero? Literally nothing that we've seen would make me think that. He's just left a trail of devastation. Is he some kind of manifestation of destiny?
Yeah.
Could be the weirdest unnecessary scene. I don't know why. I don't really know why they're on the train at all.
Davis?
It remains to be seen.
Agreed. Yeah.
I can see why he was cast in Top Gun Maverick, and I can see why he was cast in this. And we may be seeing the limit of his talent. We may be seeing all that he can do. He's not suggesting to me that he's more capable than this.
Right.
But it's entirely possible that next year he'll be cast as the lead in some NBC primetime procedural.
Sure.
And that'll be his career for 15 years, and he'll be very happy and have a lovely house because of it.
No idea.
But I don't know if he's got movie star quality. It really remains to be seen.
Yeah.
He maybe feels a little too high profile for this role, honestly. And again, if Shea Wiggum is Jeremy Renner and this part of the story is just a little bit more important, if it feels a little less like Keystone Cops and a little bit more, this is a real intelligence service coming after a rogue agent.
Yeah.
I do love how much lampshading we put throughout this film on the fact that Ethan Hunt literally always goes rogue. Like, right from the beginning of the briefing. I'm reminding you of why you got into the MIF because no goddamn shenanigans, Hunt. Not this time. And of course, immediately. Shenanigans. Shenanigans ensue. Mission Impossible 8 Shenanigans ensue. Let's talk about Vanessa Kirby playing Haley Atwell, playing Alana.
All good.
I think she's
all very
brilliant.
good. They make this really odd decision to put contacts on Vanessa Kirby.
Yes.
Instead of putting contacts on Grace playing Alana.
Yes. Well, because we want to show, because in the original film, the mask came with contacts and the little voice changing patch. So the fact that we don't have contacts here, we're kind of honoring the technology present in the first film. We hand wave the change in eye color every time someone is wearing a mask, and that's kind of fine. But I like here that we preserve it because we're preserving the artificiality of Grace wearing the mask and still having Haley Atwell's own eye color.
Right.
But Zola's standing right there.
Yeah, you would think that he would notice. I did notice immediately.
We go to all this length, too, of having Kittredge say, well, I haven't seen you since you were this big, drinking hot chocolate in Paris. You know?
Yeah.
So I get that maybe he doesn't remember
Sure.
Vanessa Kirby's extremely striking blue eyes.
Yeah.
And he definitely has, he hasn't had a briefing or anything about the White Widow in all this time.
Right.
But I like it as a nod toward... Yeah, a nod toward the artificiality of the sequence.
She does look a lot like Haley Atwell across the eyes when they do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She also adopts these little mannerisms.
Yes,
which is
definitely.
I
will say, I thought that she was in the mask earlier because she looked so nervous on the train, and I couldn't figure out why she was so nervous, about to pass out nervous on the train.
Don't really articulate this properly. She is just clearly under pressure.
Right.
Because she has that moment when she goes into her little room by herself and tells Zola not to disturb her and is tetchy about it. You're right. I thought the same thing, that this was already Grace, but it's not. She goes into the room and has that moment of gathering herself, of obviously feeling under enormous pressure. So yeah, maybe it's just the stakes of this transfer. Maybe it's her fear about Gabriel. Maybe it's a relic of a plot point that was cut.
Imagine
Imagine that this film could be cobbled together from remnants left on the studio floor. Yeah, it's interesting. But I do think that she's terrific, even in a scene that is not, I think, very good. I don't like her playing Grace as someone who is seeking the protection of Kittredge for Grace. That doesn't really work for me. That exchange doesn't work.
I found that interesting because I do like, again, that she's just trying to solve this on her own without just saying, oh, Ethan Hunt's going to take care of me. It's going to be fine. So for that, I like it.
Yeah, but we don't arc her from this point to the point at the end of the movie when she actually goes to Kittredge and asks to be taken into the IMF.
Yeah. True.
We've already done that transition.
Yeah.
So this feels like a remnant of an earlier version of her character. And then the weird, I understand turning down no, I don't understand turning down the money. I understand stealing the key back from Kittredge, right?
Oh, right.
And not leaving it with him. I don't understand why turning down the money is such an important part of that. Except that we're showing that something is more important to Grace. That's what she says, right? That if she accepted the money, she'd be selling more than the key. Because Grace would be selling something about herself. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's weirdly undermotivated. It's weirdly underbaked.
I don't know. Yeah.
This is also when we discover that, as if all of these characters being on the train weren't enough, Danlinger is also on the train because Paris goes to find him, effortlessly kills his two bodyguards, then casually leans over and unlocks the door so that Gabriel can come in, which is a great moment of physical comedy from Pom Klementieff there. I think she handles that. Just the extension of the hand, the minuscule movement to unlock the very small lock on the cabin door. Really good stuff. Silly. I think she's just terrific. And then we get another long exposition scene in which Danlinger reveals that he is kind of the one who caused the entity to happen. And he broadcast an earlier version of the entity to the Sevastopol, which is why this source code is going to have to be retrieved. That's what the key is important for, is that we have to go and get the source code from the original version of the entity because the entity has since rewritten itself so that it is less
Which
vulnerable.
is why we talked way early in the first act about whether or not Luther or Benji were better at writing code.
That's definitely going to be significant.
So that's definitely some kind of lampshade for later.
I think I have a prediction. I think that at this point, partly because McQuarrie and Cruise have been talking about, well, we could do Mission Impossible 9 and Mission Impossible 10 and Mission Impossible 11. Like, maybe you could do that. And maybe the original intention is to have him die. But since then, spoilers, you guys, for the James Bond franchise. Since then, we've had a high-profile spy series that has ended with the death of the protagonist. And I don't think they're going to kill Ethan in the next mission. I do think they're going to kill Luther Strickland. I think we're going to give Ving Rhames a real heroic moment to go out on. And that could work beautifully.
That could be nice.
I'm kind of over death as like a plot mechanic.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of, it's easy and it's so often reductive. But if we, Ving Rhames is getting old, getting even older, and I think that we could maybe give him a great action send-off for this series would maybe be great. Just to finish that last scene out, Danlinger confirms that he's the only one who knows where the Sevastopol is. Dumbass. So Gabriel murders him.
Of course.
Gabriel's motivations here, unclear. Unclear, inconsistent, one might even say.
Yeah.
Grace gives Kitteridge the key. We cut out to Ethan on the top of the mountain. We do the whole ramp sequence, which
sure.
does look great when he's in the air. I think that actually just having Tom Cruise fall from a great height with a parachute is always kind of going to look good.
Yeah. And the motorcycle falling away also looks cool. Yes.
Grace changes her mind. She steals back the key, leaves just in time for the real Alana to wake up. Zola and his henchmen hold Grace at gunpoint, only to be taken out by Ethan crashing through the window. This is not Mission Impossible. This is a different kind of... This is Austin Powers. Is what we're doing
this is terrible. It's another joke that does not land at all. It's very silly.
Yeah. Gabriel takes the key. He and Ethan fight it out on top of the train. It takes forever.
Yep.
We do get, I will observe here, this incidental moment as Grace is going toward the front of the train to try and apply the brakes, to try and stop the train from running out of control. She takes a moment to take off her coat and then pulls a hair tie out of her pocket and puts her hair up, which is a thing that I don't remember the last time I saw an action heroine do that. I think that's so great.
That is great.
It's just
I don't
like
think I noticed it, but you're right.
A regular little hair tie. And she just puts her hair up and then goes climbing on the side of the train, which she can do comfortably because she's wearing pants. It is kind of ridiculous that she falls on top of the coal bunker, right? She physically lands on top of coal, comes up perfectly spotlessly clean.
Sure.
They really, but see, you don't know this about the Orient Express. They hand wash every piece of coal to ensure the luxurious experience that you would expect from the Orient Express. Hand-washed coal coming soon to a Target near you. Ethan and Gabriel fight it out on the top of the train. Ethan, despite making his promise to Luther, is about to kill Gabriel for real when he is interrupted by Shea Wiggum. Gabriel escapes, believing that he has the key, sets the timer that triggers the explosive on the bridge just a little down the track. Ethan hands Shea Wiggum back his gun. I really like Ethan Hunt taking the moral authority in that moment. That's like an earlier Mission Impossible kind of scene. I really enjoy that one. He catches up with Grace at the front of the train, reveals that he stole the key back, and then they work on decoupling the engine. And the bridge is destroyed, and we have this very long action sequence where we're climbing out of the wreckage as the wreckage just keeps on happening. There was some controversy here. They were going to destroy a real bridge in Poland in order to create this shot. But the local residents of this town in Poland did not want Mission Impossible coming to town to destroy their historically significant bridge.
Imagine that.
Actually. So they just built a fake bridge and blew that one up instead. But now that bridge in Poland has achieved like proper governmental recognition as a historically significant monument. And that town is getting government money because it's now a tourist attraction. It's kind of worked out the best for everyone, I guess.
So funny.
Not so much for this fake bridge, which is destroyed. And then we do we climb through the wreckage, which is incredibly tense when we get to the kitchen car. The
kitchen car is the best one. That's one of my favorite sequences in the whole film, but basically everything else I find pretty poor.
So incredibly tense.
Yeah, that one's really tense and bad.
We remove any kind of real tension by, in this movie, which has our characters behaving like they are cartoons, Grace and Hunt have to avoid being crushed by a falling piano.
Yes.
Little on the nose, do you think?
Little on the nose, yeah. Also an anvil, I think. Yeah.
Wile E. Coyote holding a sign. They dodge the piano, and then Paris, as predicted, betrays Gabriel and tells Hunt all about the Sevastopol, which is the information that we need to move into the next film. Ethan and Grace say goodbye at the back of the train. Ethan parachutes out and disappears, continuing his mission. Kitteridge helps Grace to her feet, and she tells him that she accepts the choice. And then we get this long, meandering, kind of shapeless Kitteridge monologue over shot after shot after shot of Ethan Hunt kind of parasailing through the mountains until he rendezvous back with Benji.
The parasailing all looks great too.
It looks fantastic. I think anytime we're doing what Mission Impossible is for, right? To do real stunts in real places, I think it just looks terrific. We do the rendezvous with Benji, and then the camera dives into Arctic waters, and we find the Sevastopol on the ocean floor, and we cut to credits. And that's Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning. And I don't know how you feel right now. I'm exhausted.
So tired.
So tired. It's so much.
Yeah. So much. So long.
And I know we've been very critical as we moved through it. Like, it isn't a terrible film. It's just not as good as we would expect, and much more ramshackle than we've come to expect, particularly from the team of Cruise and McQuarrie.
Yeah.
Let's observe this formality for the final time.
Oh my God.
Where shall we put this on the big list of every Tom Cruise movie ever? I think that we have a window here because I'm pretty confident saying that this movie is not as good as Mission Impossible, but is better than Mission Impossible 3.
Sure.
So that puts us between 9
that gives us a lot.
and 18 on our list here.
Yeah, this drops pretty low for me on this list. Maybe somewhere around Oblivion?
Would you go lower than Mission Impossible 3? Do you think that that's a better film than this?
No, I don't.
And it doesn't have Haley Atwell in it. So how could it possibly?
Exactly. Nope.
Josh Holloway in the beginning is not equal to Haley Atwell in the whole damn thing.
Definitely not. Yeah. Oblivion, Valkyrie, somewhere around there.
Well, I think that gives us an interesting proposition. Would you rather watch this again or watch Oblivion again?
I would rather watch Oblivion again because it was shorter.
That's true. This is too long a film.
Too long.
Do you think that Dead Reckoning is better than Valkyrie? Do you feel good about putting it right there alongside the other Macquarie contribution?
I do, because I think Valkyrie is better. I think Valkyrie was a pretty good movie and pretty stirring and arresting, and it had some really great performances.
We're still, I think that this part of the list here, Rain Man, Oblivion, Valkyrie, I think we're in, and even The Firm at number 13 to a certain extent too. Right. We're in the region of like, these are solid films. There's nothing really wrong with these films.
Yeah.
And Dead Reckoning is not a solid film, but it is a film that has real high points in combination with inarguable low points. So I think it does kind of belong here, but there isn't, to me, an easy one-to-one comparison. I do probably think it's better than Interview with the Vampire. So I could put it at 17 under Valkyrie, if that feels good to you.
Yeah, I think that sounds
Unless
right.
You really want to argue for Interview with the Vampire.
No, I mean, I do enjoy Interview with the Vampire, but it also just ends up going nowhere at the end.
It goes somewhere very specific at the end, and it's a bad place.
And a bad place, yeah.
That is a movie that in its final moment leaves a much worse taste in the mouth than Dead Reckoning does for all the excess of Dead Reckoning's runtime.
I think that's right. Right there with the Mission Impossible 3.
Well, the somewhat anticlimactic then, number 17 on the list, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning. That's it. That's our list of 44 Tom Cruise movies, which is, let me check, that's all of them. Fantastic.
We did it.
We're not, though, quite done with The Last Star in Hollywood. We will be back in 2 weeks for, I guess, what we're considering a kind of season 1 wrap-up show. Sure. We're going to talk about the promise of the premise. We're going to talk about Cruise's career. We're going to talk about how our feelings about him have changed over the course of the last 44 weeks. We're going to talk about his position in Hollywood, his upcoming projects, because he has some really interesting things already on the slate. And what we can expect for the next couple of years. And then we will return to this feed. Don't unsubscribe from this feed, you guys. We will be back in May of next year to talk about whatever they're going to call Dead Reckoning Part 2.
Yep.
And you know what? By that time, we're going to be really excited again, because we're not going to remember this. We're going to remember Maverick, and we're going to remember Top Gun, and we're going to remember Jerry Maguire.
Yeah.
I'm sure that Mission Impossible 8 is going to have a lot of commonality with Jerry Maguire. Seems like he's really going to play to his strengths. Elizabeth, before we get out of here, would you like to thank our brilliant and beautiful patrons who have supported us through this entire endeavor?
Of course I would, with my whole heart. Thank you to Leslie Skipa, to Louise in Dallas, and Megan Lauder, and Phoebe, and Art Kilmer, to Kimberly Bear, and to Self on a Shelf, to Jolene Stark, to Chris Dons, and to the Lady Gordon.
We're inviting you all to join us on the Orient Express the next time it runs to Innsbruck. I don't know when that's going to be, but we'll let you know. Just stay tuned to your email. Yeah, we'll definitely have a lot of fun there. So as I say, we're going to be back in 2 weeks. And if you have thoughts, dear listener, on Cruise, on his filmography, on Dead Reckoning specifically, or any other movie that we've covered in the last 44 episodes, then please do get in touch and let us know. laststarpod@gmail.com. That episode will drop on Wednesday, the 2nd of October, which will coincidentally be the day that we start our next podcast project. Don't You Know Me By Now, a podcast series dedicated to Richard Linklater's Before trilogy. We'll have all the details that you need in that new episode of The Last Star in Hollywood in 2 weeks. Until then, and for the final time for a while, thank you guys so much for listening. We'll talk to you all again soon.
We'll see you next time.